All right, let's talk about Pelé. It's a name that is football, right? But we're going to go way beyond the headlines. We're going to deconstruct the man, the numbers, the myths, everything, really, to figure out what truly made him a global icon. I mean, just look at these claims. Over 1,200 goals, 3 World Cups, and did one man really stop a war? These are stats that are so big, they feel more like mythology than reality. And that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
Because here's the thing you have to understand. Pelé's story isn't just about raw talent, and believe me, he had tons of it. It's really a story of perfect timing. He was the right player at the exact right moment when a revolution was happening, a technology revolution. The world was suddenly getting connected by television, and that's what turned this Brazilian kid into a name known on every single continent. So let's start right there. How does a boy from a poor background in Brazil become the planet's very first global football superstar?
His rise was just meteoric. You know, he was born into poverty, signs for Santos at 15 years old, and by 16 he's already the league's top scorer. But the real launchpad, the 1958 World Cup. And here's why this is so important. It was one of the first World Cups to be widely broadcast internationally. So while this teenager is just exploding onto the scene, scoring 6 goals, including 2 in the final, the whole world is watching it happen, live. His fame didn't spread by word of mouth. It was beamed directly into people's living rooms.
Okay, so from his origin story, let's move to what many people consider his most undeniable claim to greatness, his insane success with the Brazilian national team.
Yep, 3. In any GOAT debate, this is the ultimate trump card. 3 World Cups. No other player in the history of the men's game has done it. It represents an entire era of dominance, spanning more than a decade. Honestly, it's something that's pretty much unthinkable today. This isn't just a number. It's a record that has stood the test of time.
And what's so cool is that by his final World Cup in 1970, his genius was so much more than just putting the ball in the net. I mean, just look at these moments. You've got the crazy lob from his own half, the header against England that was so powerful it led to what people still call the save of the century. And then, the dummy. The legendary move against Uruguay's keeper, probably the greatest goal that never actually happened. And to top it all off, that cool, calm, no-look pass to set up the final goal against Italy. These moments show you a player whose vision and creativity were just on a completely different plane of existence.
But, you know, for all that creativity, you can't talk about Pelé without talking about the goals. And this is where the legend gets a little more complicated.
So you've got 2 numbers that get thrown around. On one side, you have the legendary Guinness World Record, 1,279 goals, and on the other, the official count you'll see most statisticians use today, 757. That's a difference of more than 500 goals. So where did they go? And which number is the real one?
Well, the answer really lies in how his club, Santos, basically ran their business. See, Pelé was a global superstar, a massive attraction. So Santos went on these constant money-making world tours. They played hundreds and hundreds of exhibition matches against, well, everyone. Top European clubs, yes, but also college teams, military squads, you name it. The nearly 550 goals he scored in these quote-unquote friendlies are what make up that huge difference. Back then, the line between a competitive game and a commercial one was really blurry.
And don't for a second think this is just some old, dusty debate. As recently as 2020, when it looked like Lionel Messi was about to break Pelé's record for goals at a single club, Santos officially put out a statement, and in it, they argued that those friendly goals absolutely have to be counted. So for the club and for Pelé's legacy, these numbers aren't just history, they are a core part of his identity.
So after conquering, well, pretty much the whole world with Santos in Brazil, Pelé set off on a whole new chapter. He took his global fame on a mission to do something nobody thought was possible: conquer America. And this chart right here just shows you the Pelé effects in a nutshell. When he signed for the New York Cosmos in 1975, soccer in the US was, well, it wasn't much of anything. The team was getting about 8,000 people to a game. By his final season, look at that jump. Over 42,000. The impact wasn't just big, it was immediate and absolutely staggering.
And he didn't just sell tickets. He gave the entire North American Soccer League instant credibility. His first game was watched by 10 million people, a record for soccer in the US at the time. He became the highest-paid athlete on the entire planet, and his star power was like a magnet, pulling in other huge international players. It really created this golden era for the league. Now, we know the league itself didn't last. It eventually folded. But in a way, Pelé's mission was still a massive success. He's the one credited with planting those vital seeds for soccer's future in the States. The huge youth soccer boom in the late 70s, the US hosting the World Cup in '94, and even the eventual success of MLS, you can trace it all back to the American roots that he put down.
But Pelé's influence, it didn't just stop at the edge of the pitch. He became this cultural figure so massive that myths started to form around him. And eventually, he even stepped into the world of politics. Okay, let's get to that wild story about him stopping a war. The legend goes that in 1969, both sides in the Nigerian Civil War agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire just so they could watch him play an exhibition match. So is it true? Well, the reality is that when you look back at historical records, at Nigerian newspapers from that exact time, there's no mention of it. But here's what's really interesting. The fact that this story was so widely believed for so long, that tells you everything you need to know about the almost godlike status he had across the globe.
Later in life, he used that incredible status to create some real change. As Brazil's Minister for Sports, he introduced a landmark piece of legislation that became known as the Pelé Law. And its biggest reform was getting rid of a system called the pass, which basically tied players to their clubs for life, giving them almost no power over their own careers. This law is what created modern free agency as we know it in Brazilian football.
But like a lot of major reforms, the effects were complicated. On one hand, it absolutely empowered players, giving them freedom and increasing their overall lifetime earnings. But some studies show that it mostly benefited the older, established stars. The wages for younger, less proven players actually went down. So it was a massive modernizing step forward for sure, but one that had some very nuanced consequences. And, beyond all the politics and the myths, maybe his most lasting cultural gift was a simple phrase, O jogo bonito, the beautiful game. He named his autobiography after it, and in doing so, he didn't just describe his own incredible, joyful style of play, he basically branded the entire sport for generations. He gave the game its soul. So, after breaking down the numbers, the myths, the politics, what are we left with? What's his real legacy? Well, it's not some contested goal count. It's something far more powerful, I think. It's the unassailable title of football's ultimate winner, and the architect of the modern, global game that we all watch today.
And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. In our era, an era completely defined by data, by stats, by analytics, how do you even begin to measure the legacy of a player who existed before all of that? How do we measure someone who didn't just play the game, but who actually helped write the rules for what it means to be a global superstar in the first place?